People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GBNews with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. Coming up, the economic doomsayers are out to get Liz Truss and Labour's Keir Starmer smells blood in the water.
Government has clearly lost control of the economy. And so what the government needs to do now is recall Parliament and abandon this budget.
But is it unfair to blame the PM entirely for the pressure on the pound after 2 years of lockdown, which of course hammered the economy? I'll debate that next with my superstar panel. Former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. Then at 9:35, I'll ask political firebrand Anne Widdecombe if Truss needs to keep calm and carry on amid the currency crisis. As Starmer attempts to distance himself from Labour MP Rupa Huq's clearly racist remarks about Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, does the left have a problem with race? I'll get your all-important verdict on that in the clash at 9:25. Meanwhile, as Sussex police claim it's hateful to question a serial sex abuser's gender identity, prompting outrage from Home Secretary Suella Braverman, is it hateful to call a male paedophile a man? Brendan O'Neill breaks down this madness in The Outsider at 9:50. Also, do more people need to wake up to the global push to scrap cash? Social commentator and digital currency expert Leah Helpen worries that the elite could force us into green extremism by holding our accounts hostage. Do you want to live in a dystopian cashless society? I don't. She tells us more at 10:20. Is Starmer the next Tony Blair? Is he Tony Blair 2.0? I'll be asking columnist extraordinaire and former lefty Rod Liddle if Labour's purported shift to the centre is enough to win him back. And frankly, have Labour moved to the centre at all? That's uncancelled at 10:40. And at 10 o'clock, my panel will review Starmer's most radical left policy. Is a state-owned energy company a recipe for disaster? Plus, after Virgin Atlantic allows male flight attendants to wear skirts, are woke corporations trying to erase gender? That is the media buzz at 10:30. Tomorrow's front pages and Greatest Britain Union Jackass on the way too. This is Mark Dolan on Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing before we start. I'm still coming to terms with the remarks of Labour MP Rupa Huq, who said the following.
Yes, black man, but again, he's got more in common. If you look at again, it's that Joe Cox thing, more in common. If you look at the character, he went to Eton, I think he went to very expensive prep school, all the way through the top schools in the country. If you hear him on the Today programme, you wouldn't know he's black.
That's right. She said that our exciting new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, was only superficially black and didn't sound like a black man. Absolutely shocking stuff. This suggests that if you are of a conservative viewpoint or you've had an elite education, that you're somehow not really black. What she said is a total nightmare. How do you think those remarks will have made Mr. Kwarteng feel? Our first black Chancellor, a man of colossal intellect and achievement, essentially being gaslit into feeling that he isn't really a black man because he thinks the wrong things. If these were the comments of a Conservative MP, a political career would be over and a by-election would be in the offing. I guess justice is only meted out to those on the wrong end of the political spectrum. Does the left have a problem with race? You tell me. There was the convener at Labour Party conference 2 years ago, remember that, who said, can we stop having questions from white men in the hall? What about the right-on progressive journalist Ian McWhirter, who called our new diverse government with a Chancellor, Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary all of colour, he called them the Coconut Cabinet? Or how about this horrendous Guardian cartoon of Priti Patel, former Home Secretary, cast as a cow with a ring through her nose? And we know how the Labour Party has been dogged for years by a culture of appalling anti-Semitism, which, to his credit, Starmer has tackled. But he's got a long way to go if this MP's horrific remarks are anything to go by. It's a great irony that so many on the left see racism everywhere, except where it's most prevalent, in the mirror. My digest coming up, but first the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Thanks very much, Mark. And the top story tonight on GB News, the Bank of England has launched a government bond buying programme as it takes emergency action to stabilise the UK's spiralling economy. The bank announced it's buying £65 billion worth of bonds to prevent borrowing costs from spiralling out of control. The intervention follows the government's tax-cutting plans set out in the mini-budget last week. But Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffith, says the government denies it's responsible for the financial market turmoil, blaming instead on the war in Ukraine.
Every major economy is dealing with exactly these same issues. And the Bank of England has made this timely intervention, doing what it should do, what the government should do, what the Chancellor and I are focused on, is delivering that economic growth plan, which is ultimately what's going to help people. It's going to give people the confidence. It's going to create jobs in the economy and keep people in work so that they can make it through the winter, benefit from that protection in energy and continue to protect our standard of living.
But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the plans are irresponsible and he and Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, are demanding Parliament be recalled.
The government has clearly lost control of the economy. And unlike other situations where it may be a world event, an unexpected event that causes this sort of crisis, this is self-inflicted. This was made in Downing Street last Friday. And for what? For uncosted tax breaks for those earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. And so what the government needs to do now is recall Parliament and abandon this budget before any more damage.
In the United States, Hurricane Ian has made landfall southwest of Florida. The Category 4 storm, which means catastrophic damage is likely, is currently reaching winds of up to 150 miles an hour. The US Coast Guard is searching for 23 missing people after a Cuban migrant boat sank off the coast of Stock Island. The governor of Florida is warning of power cuts for millions and is urging everyone to stay inside, seek shelter and stay there.
There will be debris in the air and flooding powerful enough to move cars around. So please do not be outside during this storm. If you're in those Southwest Florida counties, you need to be sheltering in place.
Here, train drivers are set to stage more strikes in October as part of a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Members of the RMT, ASLEF, Unite and the TSSA will stage a coordinated walkout this Saturday. So a reduced timetable has been published, with only 11% of rail services expected to run and some areas having no trains at all. Network Rail says passengers should expect significant disruption and advises only to travel when necessary. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News, the People's Channel. Now it's back to Mark, who's hosting Dan Wootton tonight.
I went viral this week, and I don't mean the heavy cold and cough that's going around at the moment, or the monkeypox. My lifestyle isn't that exciting. It was the following tweet. Here's what I tweeted. Quick reminder, the challenges for the pound are because we borrowed £500 billion, 500 billion, in a failed attempt to stop a predominantly mild seasonal respiratory virus. It went viral because it touched a nerve. The truth hurts, doesn't it? Now, it's very useful for the Labour Party, who conclude their conference today, to blame this new budget, which rightly aims to increase national income, on the challenges sterling now faces. Not so fast, because although ultimate blame must be with this government for the COVID measures, it was the cervix-free leader of the opposition who waved through the eye-wateringly damaging and expensive national lockdowns, and he's a man who wanted more. Remember those circuit breaker lockdowns he called for? And he called Freedom Day reckless. And save for 100 or so brave Tory backbenchers who risked their own careers to vote against lockdowns, this currency crisis, the national debt and the burden on future generations is on Johnson, it's on Starmer, and it's on an entire generation of politicians in the House of Commons. I also blame corporations who drove us round the bend with their excessive safetyism, plastic screens everywhere, hand sanitizer, needless mask enforcement, and arrows in supermarkets. I blame the unions who pushed for school closures, the effective mothballing of the NHS, and work from home. And I blame my colleagues in the media, who would have had you believe this was the bubonic plague. Well, a plague on their houses, because look at us now. It's laughable that the Labour Party claim the Tories are reckless with money, when the only change they would make to the mini-budget is to scrap the 45% top-rate tax cut, which costs either £2 billion a year or nothing, depending on who you ask. As more people would move up the pay scale, there's an argument it's cost-neutral. Either way, it's a small price to pay to encourage wealthy people to live here, stay here, spend their money here and pay their taxes here. I don't know about you, but I want their cash. Now, amid all the hysteria this week, I'm optimistic that Britain will bounce back. The currency has already settled this afternoon. We have the second lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and we have an agile and dynamic economy, unlike the heavily industrialised, energy-hungry Germany or heavily unionised France and Spain. Italy is now in so much debt, the risk that it will fall over threatens the mother of all sovereign debt crises in the Eurozone. Another reason why in years to come we will count our blessings that we're out. But folks, we have a big problem going forward. It's not debt, in my view, which is a short to medium-term headache. The elephant in the room is spending. Businesses sweat over their spreadsheets, looking at staffing costs, tax liability and overheads, and how they tally with income. Capitalism is wonderfully efficient and unforgiving. If you run a business, you are allergic to waste. Profligacy and waste are kryptonite to private enterprises. In the public sector, not so much. Now, I love the doctors and nurses who work in our NHS. They're the best of our country. But why do people boast that the NHS is the biggest employer in Europe? That's not a good news story. That's a bad news story, particularly given that we lag in almost every league table when it comes to medical treatment. with a health service asleep at the wheel for decades as the population gets fatter, more diabetic and more medicated. For the hysterical cost of the NHS, public health is a disaster. It's enough to make you sick. The painful truth is the NHS is getting worse as it gets more expensive. Our teachers are incredible and state schools largely do a brilliant job. I speak from experience. But the cost per pupil of education in England is approaching £10,000 a year. Are those kids really getting bang for their buck? Again, when you look at the World League table of academic achievement. Chris McGovern from the Campaign for Real Education told me on GB News just a few months ago that Britain spends among the most in the world on education, but lags behind relatively poor countries like Vietnam, whose children achieve far higher attainment at a fraction of the cost. Why? Because of traditional teaching methods, discipline and a culture of hard work and accountability in the classroom. Oh, and tests and exams. Now, last time I checked, none of those things cost a penny. As proved by social mobility czar Catherine Birbalsingh, whose free school in Wembley, Michaela Community School, has transformed the fortunes of some of the poorest kids in the borough, getting them to Oxbridge in some cases by ditching progressive policies in the classroom. Waste is everywhere, and because it's public money, no one cares. Suppliers overcharge for goods, contractors overcharge for services. What about the NHS managers on six-figure salaries? Police forces filling out endless paperwork and spending thousands painting cop cars in the colours of the rainbow. And telling us not to misgender convicted male paedophiles who want to be a lady now. And what do the councils do with the billions we pump in their direction, given they can barely collect the bins once a week? So-called austerity in the 2010s was anything but. It barely scratched the surface. You, the taxpayer, are not getting good value for money. And now that things are so tight, with departmental budgets inevitably shrinking, we face the perfect storm of rising costs and worse public services. If you think this pro-growth strategy is a worry, just imagine a Labour government that will give everyone a pay rise, lock down again at the drop of a hat, and scrap fossil fuels by 2030. Labour are planning to create a new energy company based on flaky and expensive renewables. Ask Germany how that's working out for them. Hundreds of billions they've spent in less than a decade, and the lights will be out in Munich this winter. If the 1970s taught us anything, it's that governments are not enterprising. Politicians don't create businesses, entrepreneurs do. A big spending Labour government in the pocket of the unions, blindly pursuing net zero, would see the pound sliding faster than Torvill and Bloody Dean at the Olympics. Labour don't have policies, they have ways of spending your money. And there's no money left, so you're looking at more borrowed billions. And the current government have sunk us with lockdowns, absolutely. So we've got to go for a simple economic model going forward, which is low tax and small state to generate the prosperity that we all require. This is not trickle down, it's trickle up. A growing economy helps everyone and provides the national income with which to help the weakest in our society. If we do this, and if Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng hold strong with their vision for this country, Britain will become a model for the 21st century economy across the free world. If we carry on like we are, living on the crack cocaine of credit, then it's a race to the bottom. When it comes to our economic challenges, tax is not the problem. We are living beyond our means and ignoring shocking amounts of waste and inefficiency in the public sector. And post-pandemic, with talk of a universal basic income, paying people to sit on their asses at home, watching Loose Women and Countdown, expectations are now far too high about what the government can do, especially one running a colossal budget deficit. The state should shrink and the economy should grow, not the other way around. No one wants to talk about it or acknowledge it, but out-of-control spending is the elephant in the room. Tusk, tusk. To respond to that, my superstar panel, former editor and current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. Bottom line is you run a business, Adam, several businesses, pub group.
Yeah, well, 2 pubs.
2 pubs, that will do. And capitalism is ruthless, isn't it? You cannot have inefficiency, you cannot have waste. The same cannot be said of the public sector.
No, true.
So does Britain spend too much money? Do we need to have the austerity conversation?
I don't think we've got a choice with that at the moment. I think, me personally, the budget help businesses. There needs to be more. But, you know, the main thing was the energy cap. Many businesses wouldn't be around if it wasn't for the government capping energy. Again, I will go as to say that if they'd removed if they'd not gone ahead with the 45p, you know, policy and also the bankers' bonuses, it would have been hailed as a good budget. I think they've given the left the ammo to beat them with.
An easy win.
It's an easy win. And whoever advised Liz Truss and Kwasi to put those in now instead of November, you know, they should hang their heads because it's overshadowed everything. Now, I go on again, you know, you cannot collect taxes from a closed business. You cannot collect taxes from bankrupt individuals. This is shit or bust, pardon my language, but we had to do this. And, you know, I spoke to a trader today that was more worried about a Labour government with the pound, you know, than this government. So there's many factors why the pound is sliding. You know, dollar strength. It's not just on this Truss government. I think there's hysteria and the press are whipping it up, and so are Labour.
Ashley James, taxes are too high and the state is too big.
I'm not quite shocked to listen to a lot of what you're saying about, you know, austerity and that we need more public cuts. We have had 12 years of a Tory government and we're still hearing talk of how much worse it would be with Labour. Like, it can't be any worse. We are in an unprecedented financial crisis, but also crimes...
Thanks to the lockdowns that Labour supported.
Ambulances not able to get to people on time, record waiting times. Did you oppose
lockdowns? Did you oppose lockdowns?
No,
because we borrowed £500 billion.
But also, I don't think it's worth anything to blame a government for lockdowns because they were following the science at the time. So yes, we are in a huge financial crisis because of COVID, because of the war in Ukraine, because of Brexit. But we are so whilst the whole of the world is facing these like financial issues, it is worse in the UK. Like the fact that the Bank of England has had to step in, intervening in a key market because the gilt market is broken, basically. Like that is not happening in any other country. But talk of public service cuts. I mean, even when you look at even when you're looking at immigration. You know, it's taking up to 7 years for them to process asylum seekers. That should be done in 6 months. So then you can get the ones who aren't genuine asylum seekers out and you can get genuine asylum seekers paying into the system. There are so many reasons. And I even resent the fact that you're saying that people who work from home just sit around and watch Loose Women.
I was referring to universal basic income, that during the pandemic we set the precedent of paying healthy people to sit at home and do nothing.
OK, well, I think the issue I have with that is, at the moment, we brag about the fact we've got one of the lowest unemployment rates. So it's not that we are lazy that people are being plunged into poverty. It's that people who are working really hard, and I speak to primary school teachers, couples who are both primary school teachers, they cannot afford their bills. So, you know, they need help, they need support. And at the moment, this government is only helping the super rich.
That's not true.
And by the way, I benefit from these tax cuts. How are they helping anybody that...
This line on the super rich... The higher rate of tax, it either scrapping it either costs nothing or £2 billion, which is a drop in the ocean compared to government spending.
But we're not doing Windrush tax like they are doing in Europe. Like, we are just basically increasing debt. And also, helping people with their energy bills is one thing, but with how much more is it going to cost their mortgage? My mortgage is up for renewal in December, and I'm absolutely terrified. All the best deals have gone. So the money that I would have saved on energy bills, which by the way, I don't need that. I don't need that help. I would rather that help go to the people who actually cannot pay their bills. But now I'm paying an extra up to £500 a month.
But that's the same in Europe. Mortgage rates are going to go up across Europe.
Well, Dawn Neeson, what are your thoughts on this? Because you know, we had the so-called austerity of the 2010s. It's my view that, yes, taxes are too high, but spending is too high. We've got an inflated state now, which has overplayed its hand for 2.5 years, and it's got to be shrunk down because it's not sustainable.
I don't understand why nobody saw this coming, Mark. I mean, you and I were the people screaming, look, you do not understand what you're doing here. What is coming around the corner is going to be horrific. The 2 years of lockdown has led to where we are now. It really has. Other things have contributed. I totally agree. You can't close down an economy for 2 years and expect to come out of it with nothing happening. This is where we are now. That's why I spent all that money. At the beginning, I agree with Ashley, when we didn't know what was going on, yes, absolutely, you treated it seriously. After 2 years, we were still locking down when we knew we had the vaccines, when we knew that it wasn't going to kill people like it was. Why did we do that? Why did we destroy businesses? We did do that. We ruined the own economy. Now we're in this mess, and now we've got to get out of it. But talking about the NHS in particular, we need to reorganise it.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the system in Germany and Australia.
And it costs too much money.
Is
the fact that they say it's the biggest employer in Europe, is that a good thing? I think that's a bad thing.
Isn't it the third?
Why is that a boast?
Isn't it the third?
How many diversity managers are there?
And on £200,000 a year for them. But isn't it the third largest employer in the world? I think the Chinese army and the Indian railway system employ more people.
There you go. Well, look, does the state need to be cut down to size? Let me know your thoughts. Mark at gbnews.uk. Still to come, amid a currency crisis, does Liz Truss need to keep calm and carry on? Anne Widdecombe weighs in on what the Prime Minister's next move should be at 9:45. But first, after shamed Labour MP Rupa Huq's clearly racist comments about the Chancellor, does the left have a problem with race? We'll speak to Dr. Rakib Ehsan and broadcaster Narendra Kaur. They'll go head-to-head after the break. See you shortly. And you can email the programme. There you go. Let's go for Dan at gbnews.uk. You can also go for Mark at gbnews.uk. 2 emails there. Or tweet us at gbnews. There's also a poll up, so you can vote in that text poll as we speak. The results will be revealed after the break. See you shortly.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton tonight and tomorrow night. Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe and Brendan O'Neill are still coming up this hour. But first, it's time for The Clash. Earlier in the show, I once again called out the awful comments made by the Labour MP, Dr. Rupa Huq, which are, quite frankly, racist in every sense of the word, something that even Keir Starmer agrees with.
Me immediately say that what she said in my view, was racist, it was wrong, and she's been suspended from the whip in the party, and that was done very, very quickly. I think that tells you how strongly I feel about those comments. You know, she shouldn't have said it. She will be dealt with, and I'll be absolutely clear it was racist. Obviously, in the scheme of the last few days, where it's been very, very confident and buoyant here in Liverpool, it was, you know, something I, deeply regret, but I'm glad that we acted quickly.
Now, whilst I command and commend Starmer for distancing himself from his former boss's legacy of allowing prejudiced comments to go unchecked, it was rather telling that Labour's chief race baiter, David Lammy, was oddly reluctant to call out a fellow party member when asked about it on Sky News last night.
David Lammy, these are racist comments by your colleague.
As a consequence of that. So let us focus on the mainstream. Let us focus on jobs. Let us focus on climate. Let us focus on growth and prosperity.
We have been talking about that, though, for the whole conference.
I'm sorry, I make no apologies. This is not the moment to discuss.
You don't want to apologise for racist comments made by your colleague.
This is the moment to focus on Keir Starmer and what he's just delivered for the country.
Whilst Huq's suspension and condemnation by the party leadership is obviously welcome, the fact comments like these were ever uttered in the first place has once again shown the hypocrisy of the left, who will jump on any perceived offence by the right whilst spewing hate. So what do you think? Does the left have a problem with race? Let me know your thoughts. Email me at dan@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. And whilst there, you can vote in our Twitter poll, and I'll bring you those results shortly. But first, to duke it out, I'm joined by social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan and broadcaster Narinder Kaur. Narinder, let me start with you. Do the left have a problem with race?
I think the left and the right have a problem with the race. It's a very open-ended question, that is. So I'm going to say, yes, probably they do, but so do the right. The Tory government do. If you note Boris Johnson's, all his racist remarks, I'd say both parties have a problem with race. But in this instant, I'm going to say that what she said was very ill-informed. It was very silly. It was grossly misjudged. However, I don't think it was racism.
And why do you not think it was racism, Narinder?
I think, Mark, my background, I've experienced racism, real racism, hardcore racism my entire life. I've also experienced being called a coconut by my own community, and that is not the same thing. I don't care what anyone says. It's not racism. It's not shocking. And I think what Rupa Huq said has been twisted for a political agenda. I think she's been dealt with. I think it wasn't the right thing to say. We're not condoning it. But I've been called coconut many a time by my community. That's not racism. It's not. It's not nice, but it's not racism.
Narinder, how can it not be racist?
Being called the P word. Sorry?
Narinder, sorry to interrupt you. How can it not be racist to say that a black man, a very accomplished man who's become the Chancellor of the Exchequer, one of the top 3 jobs in the country, is only superficially black? On what planet is that not racist?
I think, Mark, you have to look at the meaning. You don't know what she meant behind that. I think, take colour aside, I think that was silly she said that. I think she's talking about it in a social term. I think, look, no one has had the privileges that he has had. She's saying he's not relatable to the black and ethnic minority communities. He doesn't understand the plight. He's basically racial gatekeeping. But it's not racist to say what she did. I don't think it was. I'm sorry. It's the same as me being called coconut by my own community. That's not racism. It's just not nice.
Rakib, I'm very puzzled by this. We'll come back to Narinder's thoughts shortly. But do you agree with Narinder that these comments were not racist?
Well, I have to politely disagree with Narinder. I would say that the comments are racist. And in that sense, I definitely agree with Sir Keir Starmer. And I think that he needs to be given credit for swiftly suspending Dr. Rupa Huq from the parliamentary party. I'd make the point that her comments, ultimately what she was doing was questioning Kwesi Kwarteng's racial authenticity on the grounds that he has a prestigious education, that he speaks a certain way. She was suggesting that he doesn't sound black. The reality of the matter is, in the British black population, there is a rich diversity of accents and speaking styles. But the reality is also, in Britain, we have traditional ethnic minorities that have a very strong emphasis on educational standards. And it's quite hypocritical that these comments were made by Dr. Rupa Huq, considering that she attended a private school herself. So how would she feel if someone said, as a result of that, she wasn't authentically Bangladeshi? So I think there's a great deal of hypocrisy. I think it's grotesque. Her comments were grotesque, and ultimately it is that kind of left-wing racism where there's almost it's almost questioning one's racial authenticity just because they may speak a certain way, that they were educated a certain way.
Yes, I mean, Narinder, Diane Abbott's son attended private school, famously. Is he also only superficially black?
No, I think you've really taken her words. You're all jumping on this. I think the only people who are shocked by this are people who are going to use this and twist this as a race issue.
There's no twisting, Narinder. The words were horrific.
We don't know what Rupa exactly meant, but I'm going to really guess it that actually what she's trying to say is he's actually not understanding and has no empathy of the problems that the black and ethnic minority communities suffer in this country. And as somebody who's been called the P word too many times to count, and how much racism I've received, being called a coconut or superficially brown, that's nothing. And I think you really missed the point here. The point is social. She's talking that actually Kwasi doesn't have anything relatable to the black community or ethnic minorities, especially after what he did on Friday.
Black community, Narinder.
Narinder,
sorry?
Can I ask? Narinder,
Black British people are not a monolithic block. I'd make that point.
Sorry?
And another point that I'd make, I'd make the point also that in black African communities, many of those communities are very traditional. They have a strong emphasis on education. So I would make the point that in some ways, the main point is that you're homogenizing black and ethnic minority people. There's a great deal of diversity in terms of education, socioeconomic status, ethnic background, religious affiliation within the broader ethnic minority population.
Narinder?
No, she's saying, she could be saying, actually, I'm educated too, but actually, I'm looking after my own. He's not looking after his own. Look what he did on Friday. She's saying, I may be well educated. She's not saying black man can't be educated. She's not saying he's not black. We all know he's black. She's saying that he doesn't understand the plight of the poorer people in this country. That's what she's saying. Take colour out of it. You're putting colour into it and make it, you're twisting it.
Though, isn't there?
Narinder, let me ask you two questions. First of all, do you think it's wrong to misgender someone? If somebody identifies as female that's a biological male, is it wrong to misgender them?
Yes, but it's not racism, is it? It's not sexism.
Okay.
It's not whatever.
There's a follow-up question. Has this man, this incredibly accomplished politician who got a scholarship to Eton, Kwasi Kwarteng, is he not effectively suffering? Is he not suffering the equivalent?
There's no such thing as a black community, Narinder.
Narinder, I haven't finished my point.
Okay, let's all agree on something. He's got nothing. He's had far higher privileges than most people in this country, black, white, or brown.
Narinder, perhaps you'd let me finish my question because you seem a little concerned by it, perhaps defensive. You said it's wrong to misgender someone if they identify as male or female, even though they might have been born the opposite. Effectively, that's the fate that's been suffered by Kwasi Kwarteng. He's been told he's not a black man. That's the racial equivalent of misgendering. And can I ask you a question, another follow-up to that? Are black people not allowed to be conservative supporting? Is that like a new policy that's been rolled out?
Not at all, and I don't think she was saying that at all either. I think, again, you're twisting it. This is becoming a race issue when it's not a race issue. This is a social issue.
She brought race into it.
Black people, of course, they can vote Tory. Of course, black people can vote Tory. You can vote whoever you like.
But they're not really properly black, are they?
And
Narinder.
She's not saying black people can't be successful. She didn't say that.
But they are, everyone that supports the Tories that's black, they're just superficially black. Is that right?
No, not at all, Mark. That's not what she said. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think she was silly in what she said. She's been dealt with, but I think that wasn't I don't think it was racism. And that's from somebody who suffers being called a coconut by my own community. That's not racism. Let's not make it a race issue. Keir Starmer did deal with it, but I don't think that was racism. I think it's been twisted.
Well, I think she made it a race issue by bringing up skin colour. Very ironic from the Labour Party. From the Labour Party that finds racism everywhere except when it looks in the mirror. Rakib, final question.
By the way, Dave Lammy he did say on Twitter that he didn't agree with it. He absolutely called it out.
OK, well, last thought on this, Rakib. Is this a problem among the left?
Oh, I'd definitely say that the left needs to get its house in order when it comes to toxic racial identity politics. And I think what it really needs to do is to better appreciate aspirational, ambitious attitudes within traditional racial and ethnic minorities. So I think that these kinds of, or you could call it an intervention by Dr. Rupa Huq, is deeply unhelpful, because ultimately what it does, it almost highlights the anti-aspirational nature of racial identity politics. And I think that the one message I would have is that the Labour Party should be criticising the Conservative Party on matters of policy. They need to focus less on their racial identity and their ethnic background and criticise Conservative Party politicians, their policy preferences and their political decisions.
OK, last word, Narinder.
I think to talk about that, you know, all the cabinets, the Labour Party, Tory Party, they can have as much multiculturalism as they like, but unless you identify with the communities, then it is a bit superficial, actually.
My deep thanks to both of you, broadcaster Narinder Kaur and social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Who do you agree with? Does the left have a problem with race? Jimmy on Twitter says, yes, they do, but it will never be addressed properly as they see themselves as the good guys. Sean on Twitter says the shocking reality is both leading parties have a problem with race, a point made by Narinder. And AJ on Twitter says Starmer immediately removed her whip. What about Boris Johnson's previous comments? They seem a lot worse to me. Is Truss going to remove him? Well, your verdict is now in. 91% of you agree that the left do have a problem with race, whilst 9% say they do not. We'll get to more of your opinions shortly, coming up as the likes of Home Secretary Suella Braverman voiced their outrage at Sussex Police in a misgendering row. When did it become wrong to call a male paedophile a man? Tonight, outsider Brendan O'Neill joins me at 9:50. But first, as the left and MSM get their knives out over the economy, should Liz Truss keep calm and carry on? Anne Widdecombe is next on how the PM should weather the currency crisis hysteria.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Time now for Big Witty Style with politics legend Anne Widdecombe. And as the pound struggled to keep its head above water today amid another sell-off, does Liz Truss need to keep calm and carry on amid our currency woes? Well, breaking tonight, Treasury Minister Chris Philp has insisted the government will not reverse its growth plan proposals, playing down the response to the mini-budget by arguing there's been a lot of, quote, volatility in the global market over the last year. This is after the elites at the International Monetary Fund made an unprecedented intervention into the PM's low-tax strategy earlier today. With Labour flying high in the polls, here's what buoyant Keir Starmer had to say about the drama earlier today.
Government has clearly lost control of the economy. And unlike other situations where it may be a world event, an unexpected event that causes this sort of crisis, this is self-inflicted. This was made in Downing Street last Friday. Recall Parliament and abandon this budget.
But here's the thing, Liz Truss's bold vision for growth will leave her critics floundering if she manages to pull it off. And that could spell disaster for Keir Starmer and his Red comrades. It would also put an end to lame jokes like this one cracked by Angela Rayner at conference today.
The party of serious government to the party of parties. Liz Truss has even crashed the pork market. Now that is a disgrace.
She needs a new gag writer, I know the feeling. Whilst Labour were laughing among themselves, sterling today rebounded to levels seen last week, proving that nervous Nellies on city trading floors shouldn't be so hasty with big sell-offs based on lefty organisations wanting to kick the PM. Anne Widdecombe, Liz Truss will need nerves of steel to fend off the bullies and spineless bankers. How does she do it?
She does it by keeping calm, and I think she'll do that. I mean, the interesting thing is that the government has dug in, and it said it's going to carry on doing what it's going to do. Now, I mean, look at the upper tax rate, for example. When Mrs Thatcher reduced the upper rate from 60 to 40%, and when in more recent years the upper rate was reduced from 50 to 45%, the tax take from that bracket went up, not down. So when Rachel Reeves says she's going to cancel that reduction and she's going to use the money to fund the NHS or whatever, sorry, Rachel, what money? It will actually go down if you put the tax rate up. So, I mean, that is the first thing to understand. The second thing, I mean, all the politics of envy over bankers' bonuses. The whole of the EU is subject to a cap. We aren't, and we're right on their doorstep. And that will make our city very, very attractive. And what the city never tells you, because its PR is useless, is that it brings in not billions or tens of billions, but scores of billions in taxes every single year. That's what the city does. This country thrives if businesses and the money makers thrive. That is when it thrives. It cannot thrive in any other way. Liz Truss has recognised that and is being extremely bold. I only wish she was just as bold over Northern Ireland.
Yes, Anne, you touched on this just a moment ago. This this scrapping of the top rate of tax at 45%, it's either very cheap or potentially cost neutral altogether.
It's not even cost neutral. There's a huge benefit from it, because if the tax take from that bracket goes up, as it has on each occasion in the past when we've reduced the top rate, then more money is going into the Treasury. So it isn't even cost neutral. It's an actual benefit. I can't understand why people don't see this when the historical evidence is so clear. That's why I say Rachel Reeves, if she if she increases the top rate, she will actually have a fall in income from that group. So she won't have the money to do the things she says.
And have the Conservatives, they're going for growth, absolutely, but have they given Labour an open goal with the scrapping of bonuses, the caps on bankers' bonuses and the 45p rate? Is that not a bit of political naivety from this new Prime Minister, do you think? Is it an unforced error?
I think it's politically brave. I think that what Liz Truss is saying is this is what we've got to do to stimulate growth. Therefore, we are going to do it, even if presentationally it can be turned against us. Now, let's remember this. Labour in the middle of their conference at the moment. We're hearing a lot from them. The Conservative conference will be with us very shortly. And that is when all these points can be made and driven home. And if we get a reasonable deal from the media, which is always very questionable, those points will be made. And that is different. So I'm not despairing at the moment. I mean, it was always obvious that as soon as you talk about bankers' bonuses in any positive way, there's going to be an awful lot of resentment and envy, good basis for promoting an economy.
Let's take a look, if we can, with the help of Sebastian in our gallery at tomorrow's Independent front page, Anne. It's pretty damning. Missing. Have you seen this PM? The markets are in turmoil. The Bank of England has stepped in to prevent a pensions crisis, but there's still no sign of Liz Truss. Do you think she should be more visible? And should she sack her Chancellor, as Robert Peston has hinted she may?
Well, if Robert Peston hints something, usually the exact opposite can be relied upon to happen. So the Chancellor should be feeling quite jolly at the moment. She can hardly sack somebody when she has supported that very same policy, and I don't believe it's even in her mind that she's going to do that. Imagine the turmoil that would cause. That really would let the party make the party look stupid. I think what she's doing at the moment is she's keeping her nerve, which I know is very unusual. And therefore should be praised. She's keeping her nerve and she's sticking to the policy, and we're going to be able to showcase all the reason behind it in a very short while, in a few days, in fact.
Well, Anne, I back her plan for growth, the race for growth. I think if we grow the economy, we all win, and we've got the national income with which to support the weakest in our society. So I'm on board with the project. But is there nothing about Friday's mini budget that you wouldn't change, given how things have panned out?
Absolutely nothing, because I knew how things would pan out. I knew there would be a very jittery market. If you wanted to write down, 10 predictions following any budget, you can usually do it. I think the budget was absolutely right. I think her real problem is not this immediate aftermath of it. Her real problem is that she's only got 2 years before the next general election. And this budget has got to actually show some return pretty soon. And these things do take time. So, for the growth to really start booming and for it to start showing and for people to say, yes, OK, she may have got this right. She's got a very short time frame in which to do this. This is the sort of budget that normally you would do in the first year in power when you've got another 4 years.
The voice of reason, Anne, a thrill to have you on the programme as always. Anne Widdecombe returns in a week's time to Dan Wootton tonight. Coming up, as Starmer makes a raft of green pledges, is a state-owned energy company just a recipe for disaster? I'll debate that with my superstar panel in our Media Buzz. The first of tomorrow's papers will be on the way too. But first, as Sussex police shockingly claim it's hateful to question a serial sex abuser's gender, Brendan O'Neill gives his answer to the question, when did it become wrong to call a male paedophile that has attacked children a man? I know what I think. See you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Great to have your company. It's Mark Dolan in for the boss Dan Wootton tonight and tomorrow night. Brendan O'Neill is tonight's outsider. Now, on Monday, Sussex Police confirmed that a 58-year-old Sally Ann Dixon had been sentenced to 20 years in prison for historic sex abuse against children. This is Sally Ann Dixon. Formerly John Stephen Dixon, the offender committed 7 acts of paedophilia between 26 and 33 years ago as a man before transitioning to being female in 2004. But this is how Sussex Police chose to report on the sentencing. You won't believe this, folks. Woman convicted of historic offences against children. That's right, woman. And when the public pointed out to Sussex Police that these despicable, horrific crimes were carried out by someone who at the time identified as a man, this was their response on Twitter. We do not tolerate any hateful comments towards their gender identity, regardless of the crimes committed. This is irrelevant to the crime that has been committed and investigated. Unsurprisingly, that response sparked a massive backlash. Even the new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, intervened, saying Sussex Police have done well to put a dangerous criminal behind bars, but they've got it wrong by playing identity politics and denying biology. Focus on catching criminals, not policing pronouns. Hashtag common sense policing. And thankfully, common sense was restored as Sussex Police deleted the tweet and said in a statement, "We recognise the rights of the public to express themselves freely within the boundaries of the law." How nice of them. How liberal our police are getting. So Brendan O'Neill joins us. Brendan, is it hateful, as Sussex Police claim, to call a male paedophile a man?
Absolutely not. It's truthful, not hateful. And these crimes were committed by a man. This person called Sally Ann Dixon is a man. I'm sorry. I don't care that he now identifies as a woman. If you are born male, then you will die male. And that is the biological reality. And we have to be free to say that. More importantly, we have to be free to say that these heinous crimes were committed by a man. And for the police to make a statement saying that a woman has been put behind bars for abusing children is a straight up lie. This is like something out of 1984, where the history is rewritten to make it accord with the prejudices of the time. That is what has happened in this case. The history of this case has been rewritten by the police to make it more politically correct. And in the process, they have lied to the public by saying a woman abused children.
Well, that's right. By saying a woman committed these appalling crimes, that is effectively a libel or a slander on the female race.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's happening more and more. We see lots of news reports and stories these days where it says woman arrested for sexual assault or rape or flashing or whatever else it might be. And you have to get 3 or 4 or 5 paragraphs into the story to find out that, of course, it was a man who now claims to be a woman. It is completely wrong to put these crimes at the feet of women. Women did not commit these crimes. Men committed these crimes. We know that most sexual offences are committed by men, and that's a discussion that we should be free to have, and we shouldn't be shy of having that discussion either. I think one of the problems with the way the transgender ideology is going is that it does compel us to say things that we know are not true. Yeah. And that's why the pushback against Sussex Police was so important, because what we had was people on Twitter saying, look, this is simply not true that this is a woman. You are making things up. We have to tell the truth, which is that this is a man who grotesquely abused a number of children. So that was a great defense of truth and reality against the myth-making of woke politics.
Well, that's right. It's a tragedy, a double insult and a double injustice to the victims of his appalling crimes. And it does tell you, doesn't it, Brendan, that our police forces have been drinking the woke Kool-Aid. And what worries me is, A, we're paying for this nonsense, and B, I don't think it's making us any safer. Their job is to police real crime.
Absolutely. The police should have no business at all enforcing ideological points of view, like the woke point of view or the transgender ideology. It's not their business to tell people how to speak or how to think. It is their business to prevent crime and to bring criminals to justice. That's all that the police should be doing, and they should be doing it more effectively. As Suella Braverman said, stop policing pronouns and start policing the streets and policing criminal offences. That's what the police ought to do. There have been numerous instances over the past few months and years where the police have visited people for incorrect think, told people off for transphobic language. Very recently, police officers visited a woman who had a supposedly anti-trans sticker on her front door and basically lectured her about the correct way to think on issues to do with trans politics. This is the thought police. We don't want the thought police in this country telling people how they should think and what they're allowed to say. We need to tell the police to butt out of our minds, butt out of the realm of speech, and stick to chasing criminals like Sally Ann Dixon.
Briefly, Brendan, last thought on this. You'll remember that story that went viral last week of a woodwork teacher in Canada wearing massive prosthetic breasts with huge exposed nipples. Now we've got this story of the police attacking members of the public for calling a male paedophile a man. Do you think that these woke nutters are starting to overplay their card? Do you think that the tide is turning or has turned on this madness?
I think so. I certainly hope so. I think these two cases are quite extreme, but they really show the logical conclusion to woke politics. If we have to believe that every man who says he's a woman is actually a woman, then we have to believe that these two people are actually women. And lots of us simply don't believe that. So I think we're reaching peak trans, hopefully peak woke, and lots of people are going to start asking questions and start saying, look, let's get back to reality.
My thanks to Brendan O'Neill from Spiked Online. Amazing journalism, always worth a read. Thank you so much, Brendan. Well, it's exactly 10 o'clock. Lots more to get through in the next hour of the show. Keep your feedback coming. Dan at gbnews.uk. Did you like that quick illicit shot there of Polly? That's what she looks like before she does the bulletin. It is 10 o'clock. I'm Mark Dolan. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Coming up, the doomsayers in mainstream media want to write off our new Prime Minister. But I believe that we have to trust Liz's economic vision. I'll break down how in tomorrow's papers. And of course, this story is all over the papers. We'll bring you full reaction. Meanwhile, Labour are smelling blood in the water.
Government has clearly lost control of the economy. And so what the government needs to do now is recall Parliament and abandon this budget.
But Starmer still has to convince voters to back his raft of socialist policies and green pledges. In a few minutes, I'll ask my superstar panel, Dawn Neeson, Adam Brooks and Ashley James, is a state-owned energy company a recipe for disaster? Plus, has reformed Labour supporter Rod Liddle been at all swayed by Starmer's attempts to paint himself as a centrist, as Blair 2.0? The columnist extraordinaire is uncancelled at 10:40. Do more people need to wake up to the global push to scrap cash? Social commentator and digital currency expert Leah Halpern worries the elite could force us into green extremism by holding our accounts hostage. Do you want to have a carbon footprint? Do you want the state deciding how many flights you take a year, how many steaks you have in a week, or whether you use a car? We'll discuss all of that at 10:20. Also, after Virgin Atlantic allows male flight attendants to wear skirts, are woke corporations trying to erase gender altogether, as well as the police? That's the media buzz at 10:30. And the power will be in my hands tonight as I crown the next greatest Britain and Union jackass from my panel's nominations. This is Mark Dolan on Dan Wootton tonight. Busy hour to come. Let's go.
Mark, thank you. The headlines tonight. The Bank of England has launched a government bond buying programme as it takes emergency action to stabilise the UK's spiralling economy. The bank announced it's buying £65 billion worth of bonds to prevent borrowing costs from spiralling out of control. The intervention follows the government's tax-cutting plans set out in the mini-budget last week. But Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffiths, has been saying the government denies it's responsible for the current financial turmoil in the markets, blaming it instead on the war in Ukraine.
Every major economy is dealing with exactly these same issues. And the Bank of England has made this timely intervention, doing what it should do, what the government should do, what the Chancellor and I are focused on, is delivering that economic growth plan, which is ultimately what's going to help people. It's going to give people the confidence. It's going to create jobs in the economy and keep people in work so that they can make it through the winter, benefit from that protection in energy and continue to protect our standard of living.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer says the plans are irresponsible, and he and Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, are both demanding Parliament be recalled immediately.
Government has clearly lost control of the economy. And unlike other situations where it may be a world event, an unexpected event that causes this sort of crisis, this is self-inflicted. This was made in Downing Street last Friday. And for what? For uncosted tax breaks for those earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. And so what the government needs to do now is recall Parliament and abandon this budget before any more damage.
Turning to news away from home now and to the United States, where Hurricane Ian has made landfall in southwestern Florida. The Category 4 storm, which means catastrophic damage is likely, is reaching winds barreling up to 150 miles an hour. The US Coast Guard is searching for 23 people missing after a Cuban migrant boat sank off the coast of Stock Island, and it's believed sharks have been blown inland. The governor of Florida is warning of power cuts for millions and is urging everyone to seek shelter.
There will be debris in the air and flooding powerful enough to move cars around, so please do not be outside during this storm. If you're in those Southwest Florida counties, you need to be sheltering in place.
Well, here at home, train drivers are set to stage more strikes in October as part of a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Members of the RMT, ASLEF, Unite and TSSA will stage a coordinated walkout this Saturday. A reduced timetable has been published, with only 11% of rail services expected to run and some areas having no trains at all. Network Rail says passengers should expect significant disruption and only travel if they absolutely have to. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where it's time for part 2 of Dan Wootton Tonight with Mark Dolan.
Many thanks to Polly Middlehurst, who returns in an hour's time. Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages, hot off the press, and we'll start with the I newspaper. Emergency help from bank saves pensions with public sector cuts to follow. Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng face Tory fury after sweeping tax cuts spark a fourth day of financial chaos. Bank of England is forced to step in to calm markets, buying government debt in a bid to restore confidence. Banks warn of material risk to UK financial stability as it launches £65 billion plan to fix the crisis in pension funds. Public sector cuts are now on the way as Whitehall is ordered to draw up efficiency plans to cut the deficit, something that I've called for in my monologue, which you can now catch up on Twitter at GBNews. Let Liz own the moment. Tory leadership loser Rishi Sunak is to stay away from the party's annual conference next week after the new government's disastrous first mini-budget, claiming he wants to let winner Liz Truss own the moment. Former Chancellor had warned of economic chaos if Truss was made Premier comes as Bank of England forced to step in to prevent run on UK's pension funds. Well, I suggest that you underestimate this woman at your peril, our new Prime Minister. She is the main figure on the front page of the Indie. Let's take another look at that photograph on the front page of the Independent. Missing. Have you seen this, PM? The markets are in turmoil. The Bank of England has stepped in to prevent a pensions crisis, but there's still no sign of Liz Truss. Well, why is that? Because she is keeping calm and carrying on, which is absolutely the right thing to do, in my view. But what's your view, Dan, at gbnews.uk? Still with me, my superstar panel, former editor and current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, resplendent in red. And look at that winning smile. Showbiz good looks. Speaking of which, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and the gorgeous and impossibly clever broadcaster and writer Ashley James. Now, in his speech at the Labour Party conference yesterday, Keir Starmer made a raft of green pledges, including insulation for every British home and carbon-free power by 2030. But it was the promise of a publicly owned energy company that really brought the house down.
And because it is right for jobs, because it is right for growth, because it is right for energy independence from tyrants like Putin, then yes, conference, great British energy will be publicly owned.
Standing ovations, so the Labour audience can't get enough of GB Energy. I wonder what they think of GB News. That's another story. But could this be a scheme straight out of the Corbyn playbook that will end in financial disaster? Well, let me ask you, Dawn Neeson, because I mentioned in my monologue at 9 that there isn't a great track record of governments and politicians starting businesses, is there?
BBC springs to mind at the moment, doesn't it? It's going
Right.
terribly well, isn't it? The BBC,
Right.
the fact that they've cancelled free licences for over 75s because they're about to go skin. Governments running... Look, I don't trust either the government we've got at the moment or the government that we could potentially have come and run a bath. I really don't. I don't trust any of them.
Well, you obviously... I mean, I don't think you were in Fleet Street in the 70s, but you'll have been aware... It will have been
the
on your...
1870s? No.
It will have been on your radar, probably at school and university, of what was happening in the 70s to this country.
I was there. I lived through it all.
Nationalised industries hemorrhaging millions of pounds a week.
Absolutely, and that is why we are now very few. I think it's only 5.5% of industries in this country are national industries. The BBC being one, Channel 4 being another one, and Railtrack. All huge success stories, aren't they? So it's not... several things that Starmer said there are not possible. We cannot be carbon neutral by 2030. It's not physically possible.
Exactly.
Even the best experts, the best estimates were saying by 2035 we might be 95% possible to be carbon neutral. And that was before the crisis. It takes at least 5 years to build a nuclear power station, and that's without all the planning organisation and the money it costs, etc. We just can't be entirely carbon neutral by 20. So that's rubbish for a start. And when you say publicly owned company, we are the public, right? It's not the government's money. It's our money. If that company is run badly, goes into debt, goes bankrupt, who are the people paying for it? It's the public, the people that own it. And these people trying to run the country at the moment and potentially running it in 2 years' time, come a general election, are expecting to run that as well as running the country, and they're not doing a very good job at the moment. So it sounds like a nightmare to me.
Well, Ashley, you're arguably far too young to remember, but when British Telecom, when also British Gas, when they were nationalised industries, they lost millions of pounds a year. When they went private, there was an influx of investment, much better service, lower bills, and even the government benefited because they made money from the shares. So do you really think we should be rolling back the years and going the other way?
Do you know what? What I find really interesting, and like you said, I wasn't around in the 70s, but I'm sure our parents, everyone's parents, still talk about it to this day. But what I do find interesting is that even a majority of Tory voters are calling for nationalisation of energy companies. And whilst I cannot claim to be an expert in this area at all, the world is in a gas crisis, and we are finding that. Number one, renewable energy is cheaper, but also we at the moment are dependent on these total tyrants, Putin in Russia, but also, we've just, the China state-owned CGN, the country's nuclear power.
Only 4% in this country.
Yeah.
Well, also, as Keir Starmer said, and I liked, by the way, what he said is that it's not like an ideology. He's not trying to nationalise everything, but at the moment, it's not working. And if we were to look at insulating homes, looking into renewable energy, which, like I said, is cheaper, it will save us money in the long term, and it would have avoided the cost of living crisis if we had started to insulate homes when Keir Starmer had originally said. And
you seriously think the cost of living crisis could have been averted by people insulating their lofts?
No, of course it couldn't have been averted, but it would have been already saving people. So they're saying that if insulation will save homeowners an average of £1,000 a year, £1 for every £3 that the UK spends on heating is wasted. And the great thing about renewable energy is it can't run out. It's reliable. It's not dependent on war or trade laws or markets in turmoil. It takes money from urban areas into rural areas.
Now, I will give you the insulation because it does make sense that if you insulate homes, they stay insulated.
Yeah.
So that's a long-term investment. Renewables are extremely debatable in terms of their efficacy and cost. You said they're cheaper than fossil fuels. That's only because the West have stopped exploring for and digging for fossil fuels because they've been buying it from Russia.
Yeah.
The bottom line is we're sitting on 20 or 30 years worth of shale gas. We've also got probably 50 years worth of regular natural gas and probably 200 years worth of coal. Do you not think that at the moment, with energy bills under such pressure, we should explore the resources beneath our feet and allow the renewables and the technology around the renewables to improve? Because, Germany, they've spent hundreds of billions of pounds on renewables for the last 10 years. They got rid of nuclear in 2011, and they now face a winter energy crisis. Their factories, Siemens, Mercedes, may have to go to a 3-day week because they just don't have enough power. And it's an example of what happens if you go for net zero.
Yeah, and look, I think there is debate for that. I mean, my dad bought an electric car and he had to do about 3 stops to get from the northeast down to Essex. And there's only one place in my hometown in Essex where he could actually get his car. So I understand that there's lots of conversations to be had and whether or not we can deliver it by 2030. But at the moment, I do think it is the future. And fossil fuels, they do run out, and we are at the mercy of all these...
What about nuclear? I would have thought you would support nuclear power because that's zero carbon.
To be honest, I've never really looked into nuclear. Like I said, it's not really an area of expertise
that I
have. Yeah. But I am conscious also of the climate crisis, which I feel like we can't deny. And I also saw stuff about fracking and the potential impact of earthquakes.
It's exaggerated.
Well, I don't know.
And if it wasn't for the Lib Dems, we'd have another nuclear power plant, I believe.
Yeah, Ed Davey proudly announced that he cancelled that, plus fracking as well, during the coalition government. But, what are your thoughts about this? It's a popular policy. It could win votes. At the moment, the idea of a company that's owned by the British people that can guarantee supply, what's not to like?
Look, firstly, I think this is net zero on steroids from Keir Starmer. I think it's green socialism, it's sound bites. As Dawn said, it's a load of things they cannot deliver. It's got applause, it's got media attention. It's nothing more. They haven't costed it. There's no pricing. It's fantasy politics from Keir Starmer. And again, I go back to this is sound bites that they can tweet out there, they can put in the media, front page of the Mirror. It's just not going to happen.
Well, yeah, actually, if Keir Starmer said that he was going to go all out for nuclear and make Britain the biggest nuclear superpower in the world, or energy superpower, I'd be all for that, because we know that nuclear power plants are incredibly stable, very reliable, very clean. They take ages to build and set up, but it's a guaranteed supply of energy once you've got it. Do you not think that these renewables are an experiment? It feels to me that renewables it's got parallels with COVID measures. In other words, let's hope for the best that this will work. But if we look at countries like Germany, it ain't working.
Well, I don't know enough about the topics, but I do think at the moment there are millions of people in fuel poverty, and
but shouldn't we be focusing on reliable sources of energy supply?
Energy should.
The windmills are not spinning, are they? Half the time they don't spin. They don't produce any energy.
I honestly don't know the research on.
Well, I think it was a week ago that across England, I think it was 10% of energy supply from we were getting 10% of power from wind farms that we were supposed to get out of 100%, you know, because it wasn't windy. So do you not think, I mean, my concern is about the technology, that we're investing in this technology, we're bankrolling a massive experiment which could backfire.
I agree. But going back to COVID modelling, it was so wrong. You know, how do we not know that this climate change modelling isn't wrong? How do we know that? We're fed what we're told. And I think, as you go back, we need to transition seamlessly into renewables rather than this pushing, you know, and harming ourselves in the process. I find it quite sinister, and I think, you know, it's a big agenda at play.
Dawn, Labour Party conference loved that speech. They loved the push for net zero. But how will this play out in the country? You know the British people, the sentiment of the British people, former national newspaper editor. How's this going to go, this eco-agenda, net zero, at the next election? Will the public be for or against it?
I think the people are going to be, to go back to what Ashley said, people want to be able to pay their bills. And I think at the moment the green agenda is not something people are overly... I can't talk for the whole country, obviously, but it's not something people are overly worried about. They just want now to be able to pay their mortgage and pay their bills. So worrying about the green agenda isn't the necessarily top of their minds, I would have thought.
Yeah.
It's paying their bills and getting through
if
the
you
winter.
were still editor at the Star, you've got a column at the Star, of course, would you be second-guessing that there's scepticism among Star readers about net zero?
I think there's a lot of scepticism, I can't even say it, amongst readers of all newspapers at the moment, and I think by going for the green agenda, it's going to get headlines, it's going to get applause at the party conference, because it's almost like an opinion poll. If you ask people in an opinion poll, do you think this? They're going to tell you what...
Would you pay more taxes for better public services?
They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear, what they think is right. They're not going to tell you what is on it, and that's why opinion polls are notoriously never actually accurate, are they?
But I think what people are frustrated by is, like the fact they're having to make a choice between heating and eating, but also being dependent on Vladimir Putin, on Russia.
But we're not in this country. That's the thing. We are not in this country. So we're not dependent on him, thankfully.
No, but the West's policy going for green has inflated the cost of global energy prices.
Private companies are great when they work, but they're not working for us anymore. And these companies, they're taking billions in profits to shareholders, and we aren't, like, nobody in this country, talking about schools having to go down to 4-day weeks because they can't afford their energy bills. It's a disgrace, and that is why it's not just the left, it's also a lot of movement on the right.
So the government, right, of either colour, the government get to run our energy supplies, right? The last Labour government left the country bankrupt. They left a note saying there's no money left. This government are currently doing a pretty good job of bankrupting the country as well. And you want them to run the energy supplies?
So what is BP, Shell and Exxon going to do when they've got a competitor run by the government?
To energy companies.
Ashley?
They've also just spent 150 billion on a loan to energy companies to help bail us out of this mess. Like, with that money, think of how far it would go with insulating homes. Well, I don't even know the figures, but off the top of my head, but you could have insulated every home in Britain for 150
I think I'm with you on the insulation. I think that should be a long-term objective. It just makes perfect sense. It will save all of us Brits a lot of money. But you're not keen on that windfall. You want the windfall tax, but the bottom line is that if you're keen on renewables, then we need the investment of those energy companies to go out and develop the renewables and find.
But we're not getting that at the moment. They're funneling it all into excess profits. Like, it's staying in shareholders and it's not coming back into the company, into the country. It's not being reinvested, and we have people in the country. I think even with the government's bailout plan, there's still 7 million households in poverty. Like, you know, what else can we do? OK,
well, that conversation will continue. It's all about opinions. What's yours? Dan at gbnews.uk. Coming up, are woke corporations trying to erase gender? I'll get my superstar panel's views on Virgin Atlantic's decision to allow male staff to wear skirts, hot on the heels of the Primark and Halifax controversies. That's more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages in the Media Buzz at 10:30. But first, will the international push to scrap cash allow the elite to force us into green extremism? Digital currency expert Leia Helpen joins me next.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Wonderful to have your company. It's Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton tonight and tomorrow night. We are fast hurtling towards a cashless society, and that could mean surrendering privacy, financial control and freedom, according to a new report by US think tank Bitcoin Policy Institute. More than 100 governments around the world are readying their own digital versions of cash, which would be tied to central banks, meaning stashing notes under the mattress for a rainy day will be long gone. But more sinister than that, a digital currency could give unelected elites complete authority over your finances. And that includes taking money away if you don't fall into line. Just like we've seen with PayPal refusing to service organisations like Toby Young's Free Speech Union, that it deems to have committed thought crimes, users of a central bank digital currency could be denied access to their cash or refused the ability to buy things. Imagine being told you can't buy a plane ticket because a government says that your carbon footprint for the year has reached its limit. That's one of the concerns of my next guest, social commentator and Bitcoin expert Leah Halpern. He joins me to break down the potential digital cash nightmare looming and how it could be used to force eco-extremism on all of us. Hi, Leah.
Hi, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
OK, so are we talking here about the complete elimination of cash? If we had some spare notes under the mattress, would they be worth anything?
They could be worth something, but equally they could also be worth nothing. We don't really know yet whether cash would be not accepted in certain stores. But what we do know is that central bank digital currencies are certainly coming. We saw the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, she was talking about them coming this week, even in the US. Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, was also talking about the lack of anonymity that a central bank digital currency would have. And we also know earlier this year at Davos, they were talking about the tyrannical nature of a central bank digital currency, and that a new Bill of Rights, something sort of to that effect, would have to be drawn up to ensure that people's rights and liberties aren't impinged on. That doesn't give me any confidence in the future of it, because we know that whatever kind of Bill of Rights is drawn up, they'll just, throw it in the bin, a bit like they did with the Nuremberg Code and the vaccines, when you're not allowed to coerce people into taking foreign substances.
That's right. Remember when the philosophy of doctors was first do no harm? That went out the window with the vaccine, didn't it, Leah? And let's talk about who wants this. Who's pushing for a cashless society? Is it our government? Is it other governments? Or is it an unelected elite?
Well, I believe it is the unelected elite, which is in control of all governments. So the World Economic Forum are talking about actually bringing out a carbon allowance. So each individual in this world will be given a carbon allowance, which means there's a certain amount of carbon that they are allowed to emit. This is easily put into effect through a central bank digital currency because the currency is programmable. It's digital, which literally means it can be programmed to be spent on certain things. And people might say, you know, this sounds pretty crazy, but I think it's totally realistic. If you just look at the height of the COVID pandemic in Canada, for example, if you weren't vaccinated, you had to be chaperoned to go into certain stores to ensure that you only bought essential items because, you know, you're unvaccinated and therefore, you know, you're dirty and dangerous. So with a central bank digital currency, what that basically means is it's a lot more efficient now to discriminate against people because you don't need to have those COVID marshals. You just program the money so that unvaccinated people can't spend that money on certain items. There's also really another dangerous thing, which I just want to explain as well. The money can also actually expire. So what this means is during times of economic uncertainty, central banks actually like to print more money in order to stimulate the economy because they need that money to change hands. So we could get to a situation whereby they say, okay, guys, you know, for your greater good, of course, we need to stimulate the economy. If you don't spend, let's say, 10% of your current savings, what you have sitting in the bank, in the next 3 months, that money is going to expire. And that's pretty awful. It means, you know, you can't build long-lasting generational wealth. It means you're forever a slave to the 9 to 5.
It sounds like the end of human rights, the end of personal autonomy, and the idea of a carbon allowance, that essentially rations the number of flights we can take every year, possibly how much we drive our car, or if we own a car. It might even be that we can only have steak once a week. This is the extreme outlook if we are slaves to these digital currencies.
Absolutely. It's really concerning. And again, I always like to look back to what happened over the last 2 years. They literally limited how much time we were allowed to spend with our loved ones. We weren't allowed to go into hospital to see, elderly family that were dying and that were sick. So to think that they wouldn't limit what we're allowed to spend on certain items would simply be naive. You could go to fill up your car, but your central bank digital currency gets blocked or refused because, you bought too many plane tickets. And I don't think people understand the severity of this. Money is literally the energy which fuels your life. If you do not have freedom of money, you don't have freedom of anything. You can't buy that ticket to go to protest the lockdowns. You can't, feed yourself with the kind of food that you'd like to feed yourself. Maybe your money only works to eat bugs because you bought too much meat this week. So when you control the money, you control the world.
That's right. This is not science fiction. It's not a conspiracy theory, is it, Leah? The smiling fascist Justin Trudeau in Canada froze the bank accounts of truckers who were simply protesting against vaccine passports. And China has the social credit system. This is real. This is not a drill. Explain how it works in China and why we must resist.
So essentially, because China is that communist state, that communist nation, everything that you do is monitored and tracked. So if you say the wrong thing, you like the wrong thing on social media, on their version of social media, then you're given a credit score. And if your credit score falls too low because, you held that wrong opinion, then your money will be refused. So you and I simply having this conversation could potentially bring our social credit score a little bit lower. So, if I'd like to buy a plane ticket back to England so I can come on your show, or I can see my family, my CBDC, could get refused because I had this conversation with you, bringing my social credit score lower. It's a little bit like actually Black Mirror, if you've seen it. Black Mirror is literally just this Netflix program which shows us a very realistic tomorrow.
Leah Halpern, thank you so much for joining us. A very chilling but important conversation to have. Coming up, is Starmer the new Tony Blair? Columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle joins me to debate whether Labour really are a centrist party, as Keir Starmer claims. Is he Tony Blair 2.0? But first, after Virgin Atlantic allows male flight attendants to wear skirts, are woke corporations trying to erase gender? I'll get my superstar panel's take and bring you more of tomorrow's front pages in just 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. I've got a lamb here and we will shake his tail.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's Mark Dolan in for the boss, Dan Wootton. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. More front pages have just been delivered. Let's have a look at The Guardian. Banks' £65 billion scramble to avert financial crisis. Intervention to halt doom loop that puts pension funds in peril. Truss facing calls from Tory MPs to sack Kwasi Kwarteng or face mutiny. Starmer warns PM has lost control and must recall Parliament. I don't buy into any of this panic. That's my view and I'm going to stick to it. Let's have a look at the Telegraph now. Pension funds crisis forces £65 billion bailout by the Bank of England. Emergency action after gilt crisis threatens financial stability. Number 10 adamant that Chancellor will not resign. Cabinet ordered to make savings in the public sector. OK, the Mirror next. Torched. World's lungs are being destroyed at record rate. Shock Mirror probe into rainforest burnings that are destroying illegal fires, destroying rainforests in the Amazon. And Britain on the brink, say the Mirror. Blunder Truss. Clueless PM and Chancellor's tax cuts force bank bosses into £65 billion bailout. The Star. Kwasi meets Britain's best banking brains. So does anyone have a clue what I'm doing? Pound plummets as markets panic. Bank of England forced to step in and PM has gone missing in action. The Mail now. Prison X-ray finds phone hidden in Lawrence killer's body. The smartphone used illegally by one of Stephen Lawrence's killers in his prison cell has been found inside his body after he was X-rayed at Dartmoor prison. Also, financial markets turmoil. Banks step in to soothe the city's jitters. Ministers urge calm and insist no policy U-turn. Were risky pension trades behind the chaos? We'll find out shortly. And those are your front pages. Brilliant stuff. Now more on the Media Buzz with my superstar panel, former editor and current columnist at the Daily Star. She's on telly, she's on the radio, she's in print. She's the queen of all media. It's Dawn Neeson. We've also got businessman and activist pub entrepreneur. The drinks are on him. Good friend of mine now, Adam Brooks. And broadcaster, writer, and sort of Essex girl. She lives there now, but really she's a Geordie. Ashley James. Hot on the high heels of the scandal surrounding Primark, in which two grown men walked in on a woman changing in a unisex changing room, Virgin Atlantic have now announced, with the help of RuPaul's Drag Race judge Michelle Visage, that they're scrapping gendered uniform options, quote, in an effort to champion the individuality of its employees. Take a look at the advert. There you go. Thanks to this update to the airline's gender identity policy. Next time you're on a red-eye to the US, you could get an eyeful of a male flight attendant in a skirt. This combined with June's revelation that Halifax is now including pronouns on every staff member's name badge. Is it yet more proof of the corporate sleepwalk towards wokery? It's a free country. Men and women can, of course, wear whatever they like in their free time. But should gender ideology be part of the consumer experience? What do we think? Are woke businesses trying to erase gender altogether? Ashley?
I actually love the advert, and a friend of mine is in it. She is trans. And
Lula.
Yeah. And do you know what? What I like about it is why shouldn't people be allowed to be who they are and wear what they want? And they're wearing uniform. And I think it works both ways because, as we all know, quite often air hostesses are objectified, sexualised. And so the fact that they have the option to wear a suit if it makes them feel more comfortable. And at the end of the day, who cares if people are being professional and polite? And don't we all want everybody to feel comfortable to be who they are? And as for like pronouns, if you're offended by pronouns, like the amount of times, even when I was in the Celebrity Big Brother house, people would often misgender India in there and they never knew her before she had transitioned, and that's what I don't understand. It's just respecting people for who they are, and it's interesting that it's always the right that have so much to say about it when they often call us woke and snowflakes and, you know, we want to cancel everything. Why would you want to cancel people who are just being themselves? And I think it's a really nice, positive thing.
Yeah, why would you want to cancel people just for being themselves, Adam?
Well, I've got this mental image of a bearded man in a skirt, hairy legs, serving me my orange juice on the plane.
Is that your fantasy, by the way?
With a name badge, Dave, he, him. You know, look.
But women don't wear skirts for your pleasure.
I never said they did, but this is a future I do not want for my two daughters. I think it's a scary future. We're pandering to 0.1% of the population, you know, and changing 99.9% of what we have to do or we have to accept.
You're not. No one's forcing you to wear a skirt, but also your
I
daughters
don't want a man with hairy legs serving me my orange juice.
Your daughter,
Scotland, by the way.
By the way, I always have hairy legs, so you need to get over the hairy leg thing. But also, your daughters might want to wear suits to work.
Right. Okay.
So it is for your daughters as well. Allow people to be. My son might want to wear a skirt.
A woman in a suit is not in any way the same as a man with hairy legs or whatever in a skirt.
Well, what if it's a glamorous trans woman, a biological male who identifies as female, who's as glamorous as the trans woman in that advert?
I just think it's a real strange future that we're going down.
Trans people existed in the past.
I think you know, our kids are going to be so confused going forward. I really do think that, you know, we're sending such a strange message to our children.
What, to be who they want to be?
No. We're trying to make something of such a small percentage of people as if it's everywhere, and it's not.
But gender-neutral spaces, by the way, and I know this is all kind of on the same topic, they're important for lots of reasons, because I know lots of single dads or dads who go out with their children and there's no spaces.
Do you like the gender-neutral toilets here?
No, I don't like gender-neutral toilets, but also my trans friends don't want gender-neutral toilets either, and for mainly the same reason, because we're scared of men. And every time we try and talk about things like this, like what happened with the Primark changing rooms, we're always met by not all men, not all men. But then when it comes, you bring trans people into the debate, suddenly you care about women and their safety. Like, I care about women and their safety because I have lived experience of sexual harassment and assault, as most women will, but so do trans people. And I don't see what the issue is with allowing people to be who they want to be. Like, my son loves pink dolls. I'm sure if it was a few generations ago, he wouldn't have been allowed to do that. Like, I want him to be who he wants to be. Obviously, he's so young.
Well, yeah, but isn't there a risk that school will say that he's a girl and he needs to transition?
No, because I don't think it's as extreme as that. But also, I see it all the time in children's clothing, funnily enough, in Primark a lot, that, you know, for boys you see boss, leader, adventurous, wild, and women, it's always like pretty, cute, and we're kind of boiled down to
sexy.
our appearance, or sexy, or being meek. The eyes are always closed, and so in that regard, I do think there is conversation to be had around being a bit more gender inclusive and not having like the set blue and pink. And, you know, even on the Times front cover last week, it was how to get a CEO body, and it was insinuating that CEOs are men. So I just think, who cares?
I mean, I see a difference, Dawn. I see a difference between the Halifax drama and the Virgin story, because for me the Halifax issue is that by pressurising all staff to have pronoun on their badge, you're signing up to gender ideology, which questions the existence of biological sex. If somebody is born Steve and is like, I'm Stephanie, by all means have a Stephanie name badge and you wear a frock, no problem. But I think by having the pronoun thing for everyone, it enforces the brave new world of no gender. But I think this is different, isn't it? Isn't this just a case of if you want to wear a dress, wear a dress?
I think I totally agree with Ashley on this, I must admit. Provided your uniform is smart, you are efficient, you can do your job very well, then I don't have a problem with what either male or female or trans people choose to wear as part of their uniform. And I'm sort of like, I live and die in trousers. I mean, as a woman, does that mean I should wear a skirt more? I mean, no. Women and men have the right to wear, going back to the whole Iran debate as well, where a woman was killed for not wearing a headscarf properly. So, no, you have a right to wear what you wear. And as far as the uniform's concerned, as long as it's smart and functional, I don't care what people wear.
Yes, and just a point of order on the Halifax story, Adam. It was up to the staff. It is up to staff if they have the pronoun badge. But my argument is, woe betide anyone that doesn't put their name on the name badge. It's pretend voluntary in my view, because you're going to be guilt-tripped into signing up to this.
Of course.
Imagine if you're the one that goes, no, I don't want pronouns, thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
How long will you last at that branch?
Exactly that.
And plus, if your name is very obviously a female name or a male name, do you need a pronoun underneath it? I mean,
so if we've got to spell everything out for everyone now.
I think the idea behind it is if I say I'm a she, her, which I am, and I always have been, and up until the last couple of years, I'd never thought any differently of it. If me putting she, her, which I have done on my Instagram bio, makes it easier for other people to be able to come out and be who they want to be, then does it make any difference to my life? Because most people will call me she or her anyway. But for, our friend
are virtue signalling?
It's not virtue signalling, because it makes no difference to my life. And
so why are you doing it?
Because it allows other people in society to find it easier to be who they want to be. But it does, that's a fact.
It's not a fact. It's putting he, him after my name is not going to make anyone else
it does,
feel
it
more
makes
comfortable.
people more comfortable to.
But what it does is I hear what you're saying, and it's a plausible argument, but there's more to it, because I think if you put your pronouns on your Twitter bio or anywhere else on your name badge at work,
Mark.
Well, what you're doing though is you're signing up to the idea that a man rocking the full meat and two veg can walk into a women's changing room and say, actually, I'm a lady today.
I've got two daughters, and that horrifies me. This Primark story...
It's not only the unisex story, is it, though? Because it's also other stores who will allow biological men into the ladies' changing area as long as they self-ID, which means I'm a girl, even though I'm a boy.
That's profoundly wrong.
Well, today I'm a giraffe. Well, you could be a giraffe with your height, Mark, but
these are the
where does it stop?
The creeps, the same people, these are the people that trans people are scared of as well, and it's, I'm scared to walk down the street because I'm scared of men. Of course, it's not all men. So I feel like this debate, we're all scared of the same thing. But I promise you, trans people are scared of the same thing that we are. And if anything, they're most at risk.
OK. All right. Final thought?
But it's like going back to the tube where you can't say ladies and gentlemen over the tannoy anymore. We are pandering to 0.1% of the population to be inclusive to... It's ridiculous.
And most of that 0.1% of the population, like our friends who don't care.
Don't care, and not in their name, absolutely right. Well, look, coming up, Dan has bestowed upon me the power to crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union jackass. My panel review their nominations at 10:50. But first, after Sir Keir Starmer's latest speech at the Labour Party conference, columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle debates whether he's Blair 2.0 or just a blagger in Uncancelled next, just after we take a look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight with me, Mark Dolan. What does Liz Truss need to do to finally get Brexit done? Marc Francois, head of the European Research Group, presents the new PM with a Brussels battle plan. Plus, there's more unfiltered opinion from trigonometry host Konstantin Kissin, UKIP leader Neil Hamilton, and my superstar panel, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nickel. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
It's time for Uncancelled, in which Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of cancel culture that is sweeping the rest of the media. Now, notwithstanding a few bumps in the road, it's been a strong Labour Party conference for Sir Keir Starmer. And what was particularly notable in his keynote speech yesterday was what sounded quite a lot like Tony Blair 2.0. Take a listen.
My message is this. If you're grafting every hour to buy your own home, Labour is on your side. Labour is the party of home ownership in Britain today. I want to be crystal clear about this. I'm not just pro-business, I want to partner with business. That's why we had to show our support for NATO is non-negotiable. Show we want business to prosper. Shared unworkable policy. Country first, party second.
There you go. So is Starmer the new Tony Blair, or should he enjoy his moment in the sun before Liz Truss bounces back? Delighted to welcome Rod Liddle to the show. Rod, is this Tony Blair 2.0?
I sincerely hope not. I must admit, I find myself being pulled by a kind of magical force towards Keir Starmer. I think his conference speech was excellent. I think he's done an extraordinarily good job with the Labour Party in the last couple of years. He's expunged from Labour almost all of its idiocies. There's still the residue on the culture war stuff. He still would go along with Ashley on a few things, which makes him, for me, almost unelectable, but not quite. I mean, I think given the way he's performed, I find it hard to see the Conservative Party winning the next election. I think he's been an admirable leader of the Labour Party. Where I think he's different from Tony Blair is that, do you know, I've got a tendency to believe him. And that never happened with Tony. It didn't even happen in 1997. I never actually had the feeling that this was a man suffused with honesty, decency, and probity. Whereas I think what Tony Blair has and which Keir Starmer doesn't have is a great degree of charisma, youthful charisma, and that rather slick and wonderful prolix means of speaking. But then again, when you look at Keir Starmer, he is up against Liz Truss, who is possibly the worst public speaker that we've ever had as a Prime Minister in the history of this country, although I can't remember how well Robert Walpole spoke because we don't have any tape recordings of him. Yeah. But I would guess it was slightly better than Liz. So I think that Keir Starmer, and it's it's a frightening thing to say, but I think Keir Starmer is a very, very able politician who delivered a superb speech, whose speech upon the death of our Queen was dignified and beautifully expressed, and expressed with emotion. And he's managed to expunge pretty much everything that Corbyn wrecked the party with, and is doing a better job, a much better job, than the previous leaders as well, Ed Miliband particularly.
However, Rod, you touched on it, Keir Starmer is irredeemably woke. He's also...
I don't know that he is. I don't know that he is. I don't know that he is irredeemably woke, because to be woke, to believe in some of these things, is to be delusional. And I don't think he is delusional. I think he knows full well that there are too many people within his party who would carp and cavil if he didn't, drop to one knee or fail to describe what a woman is exactly. I think probably if you got Sir Keir Starmer alone and said, come on, Keir, you know what a woman is really, don't you? It's an adult female, isn't it? I think he'd probably agree with that. Perhaps I'm just projecting, but I don't think so. I mean, the wokery is the last thing which the Conservative Party have over Labour. We know all the opinion polls. It's, somewhere in the region of 90-odd% on transgender issues. It's not terribly far short of that on some of the wilder claims of Black Lives Matter and so on, and all this decolonising stuff. Deeply, deeply unpopular with the electorate, and especially with the electorate in those red wall seats where I'm sitting at the moment. Yeah. And that's the last thing which is standing between Keir Starmer and a very, very healthy majority indeed, I think.
Okay.
That and Scotland a little bit.
Okay, well, a vote of confidence in Keir Starmer from Rod
Keir?
Little. Rod, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you in a week's time. The associate editor of The Spectator. Rod, of course, writes for The Sun, Sunday Times, brilliant, brilliant journalist. Always great to hear his thoughts. It's time now for this. Yes, indeed, it's time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union jackass. And my superstar panel will do just that. Former editor and current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, businessman Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. So, Dawn, what have you got for me? Who is your Greatest Briton?
It's an honorary one. It's a Frenchman. I know, shocking. And it's
Macron?
Oh, yeah, him. No, it's Eric Cantona, who gave an interview this week saying he was completely boycotting the World Cup because it's being played in Qatar, where homosexuality is punishable by death and women rape victims can be flogged for being guilty of sex outside marriage. He, instead of watching any of the games, is going to take off on his motorbike and ride around South America.
Ah, it's wonderful. What a hero. How about you, Adam? Who's your greatest
Mine
Briton?
is Suella Braverman for rightly calling out soft and woke policing. Things have got to change.
They've got to change. Ashley, how about you? Who are you waving the flag for tonight?
Mine is the Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, for just talking about what Labour's childcare reform is. For me, this is a no-brainer to keep mums in the workplace. Currently, 54,000 mums a year have to leave the workplace. And I'm also excited to see what Kit Mothouse has to say next week.
OK, well, my winner is Bridget Phillipson MP, because women have a colossal amount to contribute to the workplace, and better childcare allows them to do just that. Great shout, Ashley. How about Union Jackass? Dawn, who gets the thumbs down for you?
It's somebody we've already discussed tonight. It's Rupa Huq for her appallingly racist comments about Kwasi Kwarteng. I couldn't believe what I was
Disgusting.
Yeah, truly horrific. How about you, Adam? Who's your Union
Well, I had
Jackass?
a Twitter spat with this guy. It's Labour MP Cole Turner for calling this government far right. It's ridiculous. I think he's a pillock.
Yes, it's a meaningless slur which has lost all of its power, and it allows people who are far right off the hook. How about your Union Jackass, Ashley?
My Union Jackass is Daniel Hannan for blaming the pound crashing on the markets being terrified of Keir Starmer as if they just discovered who he was on Friday. I think it's interesting that, you know, they've spent so long blaming the past Labour government that now they're blaming a future Labour government.
OK, well, I think, obviously, it's a fair point you've got to make. It will be held by some. I'm going to award tonight's Union Jackass to Rupa Huq. It ties in with my earlier comments at the start of the show. Her remarks were outrageous, deeply racist and profoundly offensive. Yes or no across the panel? Should this MP stand down? Should there be a by-election in her constituency? Dawn Neeson.
Look, I don't like calling for people to lose their jobs lightly, to be honest with you.
OK.
I think we need to hear what she's got to say for us.
OK. What do you think? Should she step down as an MP, Adam Brooks?
I do, because this is one of many instances where she's been racist or really, really offensive. So I think she needs to go.
Ashley, if it was a Tory MP, I'm sure you'd be calling for them to stand down and for a by-election. Would you say the same for Rupa Huq?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think racism is excusable on the left or the right, and I actually applaud Keir Starmer for nipping it in the bud very quickly. And to be honest, I don't agree with cancel culture, but I don't think she deserves a place in the Labour Party.
My profound thanks to my brilliant panel tonight. Great debates. Also, for your company, I'm looking after the shop tomorrow for Dan at 9 as well. Thanks to the team for working so hard today. And headliners are next. See you tomorrow at 9.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Outbreaks of rain will spread to some areas overnight, with clear spells in other places and a chilly start for Thursday. Low pressure at the moment towards Denmark, and we've still got this rather cool northerly airflow. It's bringing a number of showers and in places some more persistent rain, for example. An occluded front heading into eastern Scotland, northern England through the evening will bring persistent rain in places. That will sink south into central parts of the UK, eventually clearing into Wales and the southwest by dawn, turning more showery as it pushes south. Clear spells following. Under those clear skies, some mist and fog forming across the Midlands, eastern England, for example, and a chilly start in places first thing Thursday, where we get those clear spells. Temperatures in some spots into the low single figures. But after any mist and fog clear, after the sun warms things up. Actually, for many, it's a brighter afternoon, sunny spells, but there will be further showers coming along, especially for eastern Scotland, eastern parts of England, into central areas. Temperatures, though, up a degree or so compared with Wednesday. We're looking at 18 Celsius, the top temperature there for parts of Wales and the southwest. Now to Thursday evening, areas of showers will push south, fading away, and lengthy clear spells then for many, at least at first. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, thicker clouds start to arrive, the wind picks up, and by the early hours, outbreaks of rain into the far northwest. That'll keep things mild here, but across central and eastern parts of the UK, well, it's a colder night to come with low single figures in places and some dense fog around first thing Friday. The fog will last until around mid-morning, then it'll clear. Bright skies follow for the Midlands, East Anglia and the South East, at least for a time, before wind and rain sweep in from the west. Heavy rain, particularly over western hills, and strong winds reaching gale force in exposed spots. Saturday's also a blustery day with rain or showers, but it turns drier on Sunday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's